What an incredible intro. Thank you, Nick. I have an incredibly special guest with us today. I want to take a minute and I'm going to ask my guest to please introduce himself.
Yeah, this is Skye Hissey.
Skye, how long have you and I known each other? I think we met
It would
89, 90.
it would have had to have been, yeah.
That crazy show at the Apollo Theater that gets raided by the police. I think Little John Fuller had snuck away and he's hiding out in the Apollo. But Skye and I have been friends since at least 89, 90. We are both artists with a long history together, and we're going to have an incredible conversation today. Take some time and enjoy ourselves. So, Nick, let's bring up that first graphic I sent you, and we're going to take a minute to thank our friend Michael Maverick, who came on our show last week. Michael, I really appreciate you and Dakota coming on our first two episodes. Michael is playing out at Bad Habits next Saturday night, August the 31st. Bad Habits is located on Winchester Avenue, just on the outskirts of Martinsburg, West Virginia. It's going to be an incredible show. It features Jester and the Mad Pranksters, Everyday Catastrophe, High Horse Cavalry, Michael Maverick and the Chaos Effect, and FYA. Again, that's next Saturday, August the 31st, Bad Habits in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Okay, Nick, let's go ahead and take a look at... Oh, wait. I wanted to take a moment, Skye, and I try to dedicate every episode. Sometimes this slips my mind. Right. Have you ever read any Hermann Hesse?
Yes.
Which ones of Hesse's have you read?
My favorite is Siddhartha, and I've read Siddhartha and Steppenwolf.
I read Siddhartha, Steppenwolf, and The Glass Bead Game, which one of my favorites. It's his last novel, set in this dystopian future, and very much an allegory of art, right? The Glass Bead Game is essentially being an artist. A really neat book, and really a fascinating writer, and very relevant to the conversation that Skye are going to be having in a little bit. He was one of the favorite writers of the counterculture from the 60s. I first got introduced to him on reading a biography on Timothy Leary, of all people.
Yeah.
All right, Nick, let's go ahead and let's take a look at that first video that we have clued up. Today we're going to be talking about Jackson Pollack and the CIA's involvement in modern art. Did you see this film?
Jackson Pollack.
I did. I saw it when it came out.
Krasner.
I've seen
I
it.
thought I knew all the abstract artists in New York, and I don't know Jackson Pollack.
I saw it when it came out, and then a few times since then.
He's all right. He's learning. What's she doing here?
You need to get cleaned up.
I have just climbed up and down 5 flights of stairs. I am Peggy Guggenheim. They're sorry. My God, and you're drunk.
No.
I think Ed Harris is probably one of the best actors of his generation.
In the country.
We're broke.
You just keep at it.
I'm keeping at it. Don't tell me to keep at it.
You've done it, Pollack. You've cracked it wide open.
Genius. Jackson broke the ice.
I don't think you realize how hard I worked to get people interested in you.
Let's make a baby.
The vows don't stipulate baby.
We'll be dead without her.
But I'm the one who loves you, Jackson.
If you don't stop seeing her, I'm going to leave you.
You open that mouth again, I'll kill you!
You are killing me! You are killing me! You are killing me!
Stop playing, but we keep dancing. The world keeps turning.
Yeah, he was really great in this.
Yeah. Top notch in that Apollo 13 as well.
The sun is down.
Big fan of Jennifer Connelly as well.
I remember joking about this movie when it came out. It was and then I went on and read a really large, pretty extensive biography on him.
Some of your critics, they have said a mop of tangled hair, cathartic
It's kind of one of those like never meet your heroes, you know, kill your idols type thing. You know, when we were really young and you kind of glamorize people like him, and then when you know more about him, you're like, oh, okay, maybe this drunken artist, wild man thing, you know, there's a little, that's the glamour, that's the tip of the iceberg, and then the rest of it is like, whoa, maybe I need to tone this down, get a hold of myself.
I completely agree,
Yeah.
because not only, you know, am I a fan of Pollack, I'm a fan of all the writers of that era as well. I mentioned William S. Burroughs in our episode 1. Big fan of Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and all of those counterculture figures from the 50s and the early 60s. Let me ask, Guy, how were you first introduced? Because I know when we were meeting and you were just beginning your career as a painter in the early 90s, how did you discover Pollack, and how did you personally discover painting? That's what I'm curious now.
Well, Pollack was definitely just an omnipresent figure in art and art education, and people knew about him just even as a kid, you know, the splatter painter and stuff like that. I didn't know he was a part of a larger art movement, and I didn't know about his contemporaries in the New York abstract expressionists. That came later, and really that awareness really came to me through, you know, it sounds ridiculous now because we're the same now, but, you know, back then when I was 18, 19, and had friends like yourself that were a little bit older, guys like Ed Ramsberg, Don Ramirez, you know, some local, Steve Dobbin, these local artists that were a little bit older than me, kind of like the community, you know, I was accepted into that community and basically got educated from older people, older guys that I looked up to. And I was like, well, what are they into? And you guys kind of, you know, kind of opened up the door a little wider for me to kind of get interested in, you know, like you said, the art kind of came from other people. And I never really even heard of William Burroughs and that kind of stuff until like you know, I'd heard of Naked Lunch, you know,
right?
And everybody had. It was like, oh, you're a bohemian, you want to read like, but I never got into all that kind of like cut and paste writing and stuff like that until you kind of were like, no, you should check this out, you know. And as far as art goes, I've just done art my whole life, and that's just been something that I just did, and you know, kind of through school was like, oh, you should. Here's more, you know, when you show interest in something, people gravitate toward you and want to show, you know, want to educate you more and expose you more. And that's what you guys did too. So art's been a lifetime thing. The deeper awareness of art and art culture happened, you know, when I was in my 20s by being involved with older artists.
Who are some of your favorite painters from the abstract expressionist movement?
You know, it's like I want to, you know, it's cool to say like, oh, William de Kooning and Mark Rothko, but really my favorite, you know, was that guy Franz Klein, because he was much more linear and literal. Like it was something graphic, I guess, in some ways. It just appealed to me more. You know, I was never loose. I was never loose enough for really hardcore abstract expression, you know. But yeah, the Franz Klein was kind of like my favorite, and Willem de Kooning was kind of like what I wish I could have done.
Yeah.
You know, I wish I could have been loose enough to be that.
Yeah.
And Jackson Pollock is, you know, if you see his stuff in person, then you get it. Then you get what it, you know, looking at a picture in a book, you're like, oh, okay. But you see it in person, you know, on the scale that he painted, then it's a different thing.
I was always a huge fan. Like my favorite abstract painter is William de Kooning. I always romanticized him. I was happy to see, you know, Val Kilmer play de Kooning. You know, I've paid a lot of attention to his career. I was fortunate enough to see an exhibition that they did. He has an incredible story. Towards the end of his life, he's suffering from Alzheimer's, and his sons and they actually go to court to take the painting brushes and the paint. He's not allowed to paint because his family believes that it will diminish the values of his earlier paintings.
Because his later paintings were very minimalistic.
I thought they were beautiful. I thought they were some of the best work.
It's a career arc. It's not what he. It's simplified. And it's like still has value.
Yeah,
it's just, It's just what he is making at the time. But that's the business. That's the art biz.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, artists that produce art through the entirety of their lifespan, I've always valued that, and I've always enjoyed how artists with evolution, and I really see that in Pollack too. There is early periods in his work where he's fairly representational before he moves to the abstract. And in your paintings, you've always tended to have subject matters. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Like I said, I've never. I tried to get into like abstract expressionist stuff, and I'm definitely, I think, a product of my upbringing where, my first exposure to like art was comic books.
Right.
So I'm very line based. I like linear. I like to see lines. I like to see subject matter. I still am kind of locked into that.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly, for a little while, I felt like I had to that abstract expressionist art was the ultimate art, and that I needed to like abandon what I naturally would do and pursue this, and it just really never fit me that well. But I still appreciate it and love it, and kind of in some way wish I could be that kind of artist. But you got to be what you are.
I think that's a perfect segue into the larger topic, that since this is a conspiracy-oriented show. Nick, let's take a look at roughly 5 minutes of there are 2 great videos that I've found on YouTube that are related to this whole idea of the CIA and backing modernist art. We might watch just a little bit more of Hidden Hands. We have one from Hidden Hands queued up. Let's take a look at least 5 minutes of that. A little countdown there. I thought that one was kind of interesting. I'm not... Fumar, what is that, German or Spanish? Spanish. You can bring the volume up just a little bit. We'll use this as a good education.
For centuries, rulers worldwide have forked out fortunes to promote the arts. Rarely have they done so in secret. This program tells a bizarre story. How, during the Cold War, an arm of the US government provided covert funding for a huge variety of cultural activity. Intriguingly, this included work by some of the most resonant names in modernist art. Jackson Pollack, Willem de Kooning, Mark Rothko. Even today, much of the arts establishment refuses to address the issue of this covert patronage, or even acknowledge the existence of these hidden hands. For the patron was the Central Intelligence Agency.
It's my contention that the CIA not only engaged in a cultural Cold War in the abstract and purely pragmatic way, but that they had very definite aims in view, and they had a very definite aesthetic.
The idea that the world would succumb to a kind of fascist or Stalinist concept of art and literature and music, that this was to be the wave of the future. As you look back on it even now, it's a horrifying prospect.
During the Cold War, part of the U.S. government's cultural program was to put forward the claim that there was no such program, and that the creative works of composers and movie makers and artists and so forth were done entirely independently, when in fact that was not necessarily true.
But as far as the attitudes that the agency wanted to inspire through these activities, clearly what they would like to have been able to produce were people who, of their own reasoning and conviction, were persuaded that everything the United States government did was right.
We're going to go to
Autumn,
William
Paris,
Colby. I think he's up
1955.
next.
At the National Museum of Modern Art, an exhibition is about to open its doors. The exhibition, which has been seen in nearly every European capital, is called Modern Art in the United States and is partly dedicated to abstract art. A new art movement known as abstract expressionism dominates. There are major paintings by artists who are to change the course of post-war art history. There's work by Willem de Kooning, by Arshil Gorky.
I got to admit, it was a lot of fun doing the research for this because I haven't looked at these paintings. I haven't been a producing artist since 2012, right? And so much of my last body of work is based on, you know, it was the first time I ever really used my hands instead of cameras.
Yeah. Well, I know, you know, we talk about, you know, back in the day when we met and, you know, you were doing...
Let's go ahead and close that one out, Nick.
Yeah, you were doing a lot of experimental film at the time, like conceptual filmmaking, Super 8 filmmaking, and, you know, I'd never heard of that. You know, that was radical, like filmmaking as basically, you know, expressionism. Like, what's this movie about? I don't know. How do you feel? That's what it's about. You know,
I want to. I can't stress enough. Skye stars in my student film, UMBC. 1993, I managed to bogart myself into the film program. I met probably the single most influential art professor of my life. His name was Alan Price, right? Film 101. I basically stalked this guy to get into the UMBC film program. And I remember, you know, basically trapping him in his office. I brought my portfolio from and you know, so we have a great talk. He likes my work and he says, I tell you what, come to the first day of my class. If someone doesn't show up, if one person, I'll sign you and I'll let you in. And thank God, I mean, I showed up the first day and a dude didn't show up, and I got into Film 101 at UMBC, met some amazing people, and it was I'm 27 at the time. 27. It's the first time that I'm introduced to Stan Brakhage and this whole idea of abstract film, right? I didn't know that such a thing existed. We actually have Mothlight that we're going to show a little bit later. But, you know, the abstract philosophy, right? I found myself thinking about this when I was preparing for this episode. When I was an undergraduate at Shepherd, when I was an undergraduate at Frederick Community College when we first
Yeah.
were meeting, at UMBC, Micah, Maryland. There's a couple of places I took classes. I transferred everything back to Shepherd. But representational art was so frowned upon. Like that was the quickest way to
absolutely.
be outcast. There wasn't even any kind of form of traditional art making in any of the programs I was familiar with.
This abstract or expressionistic art, whether you were doing film or painting or sculpture or performance art was very popular back then. And theater, abstract theater, like and when when I kind of got introduced to this this kind of the CIA was involved, and it was like I always wondered, like, okay, this is all, how did this become, it should not have become as big as it did.
Right.
Like, I should not have been in rural Frederick, Maryland, and been thinking I was some kind of abstract bohemian. Like, how did this get introduced to me? It's because of this push,
right? Here's all conspiracies are hidden in plain sight. Skye knew one of my great loves in my life was a beautiful woman named Nature Nehemias. Dated Nature when I was a much younger man. We took a trip to Kent State University, right? I got to meet this relative of hers who was a contemporary of Mark Rothko, had painted with Mark Rothko. He taught at Kent State. It was Kent State is one of those places that's just part of counterculture history. Right?
Yeah, it's cemented in counterculture.
In
history. In history, really.
But the one thing with Mark Rothko, right, is he said politics and art only make for boring art, right? That this whole idea that politics weren't really a subject matter. And in these documentaries, and you see why the CIA is pushing modernist art over, say, Diego Rivera. Think about it, right? During the Cold War, communist painters are using paintings as a way to rally people around causes. If you're presenting abstract art and you're telling people that the journey is about being inward, it helps to clearly suppress over politics inside of the subject matter.
It worked for Christianity,
Go on.
It's a formula, it's what we as people in the United States are I feel like the worldwide evolution of, and of course, I think abstract art in any kind of form is the same way. It's like what we are people that are about ideas, and we're about feelings and big concepts. Where the Soviet bloc was about let's make art that depicts work, and let's make let's show the dignity of work and the communal unification through work. And American art, the way to counter that is like, well, let's talk about how you feel about freedom. Let's talk about how you feel about yourself and your place in the world. And it's like, nobody wants to go to work. It taps into something deeper. And I think that's always been the appeal. And it's like, how can these other cultures combat that when it's like, well, our art and our government and our community is all saying, here's a physical manifestation, here's work, here's sculptures of work, here's the dignity of work, here's the joy and the pleasure of serving your community. And then, those people still went home at night and had feelings. And the American art was like, let's talk about your feelings. Right. Everybody relates to that. They're like, well, I do have feelings. I do have desires. I do have pent up emotions, And
I remember also, all right, with World War II, Hitler has a very distinct aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
He produced the Nazi regime support the arts. They have a very specific aesthetic that they want. The idealization of the human body is important to them, but he also did. There's this infamous and famous show that he did where he collected up all of the avant-garde artists of that era, and he has this exhibition called Degenerate Art. I was fortunate enough to see it. I might have went to BMA, but the one thing, I think it's important that we put in the context. All right, if we're going to talk about Hitler, we're going to talk about the Soviets, we also have to talk about the persecution of artists as well. Because, you have the Art Institute of Chicago is basically the Bauhaus, this famous German art school, the leading avant-garde art school of the 30s, flees Nazi Germany because of the persecution. Artists were executed in Nazi Germany under the Red Triangle. I remember during the Occupy Wall Street days, I painted a red triangle. And when we talk about it, we're still talking about Dadaists, right? We're not even talking about people making propaganda, but we're just talking about people whose ideas that the Nazis saw as subversive to their society.
And I think if this is, if this CIA-backed abstract art movement, and so whether it's arts and writers and music and everything that was going on in the 50s, it's like that is propaganda. That's our propaganda, right. But our propaganda is intellectual propaganda. Right. It's like we're going to let you come to this. We're going to guide you, even though you don't really realize it.
Yes.
But you're going to think it's your idea.
Right.
And then that's going to root. Whereas being told what to do, Americans hate being told what to do. But if you can trick Americans into thinking what you want them to think and have it be their own idea, then they're all in.
Right. Excellent.
And this was an organic art movement. These people were real. They
with a history before the Cold War.
Yeah, they were doing their own thing. It's just the exposure and the validation that it got through this through this backing. It would have never gotten bigger than New York City or art elite. It wouldn't have expanded past that, but it did. And you have older. I know I was growing up, and you'd have older people say, "I don't really understand it, but they say it's good."
Right.
So you tell yourself that enough, then eventually you're like, "Oh, it's good." This is America. This is America too.
And the prices that are paid for, classic abstract, Pollack gets hundreds of millions of dollars for his paintings, and same with the other major names that we're talking about.
I've heard and seen things about the art market now, and that again is another who's buying these things? Mm-hmm. Who's paying the millions of dollars for a Jackson Pollock? Well, probably the government backing buyers to crash other art markets and to continue to promote these artists as the great American artists. Jackson Pollock's worth more than Picasso. Right. It's worth more than Van Gogh. It's worth more than America has still got. We still have to promote this, because I don't think anything really significant's happened since. Really,
I found with that last thought, I found myself thinking when I was a younger artist, I thought the great conspiracy was the chokehold that certain people had on who gets famous, who gets chosen, who gets to be the next Damien Hirst. But then when you look at it from, it's not even these collectors or these dealers in New York City that are controlling it, that it may be more nefarious actors in this. Nick, let's take a look at the next clip. We'll do a couple of minutes on that, and then we're going to continue this conversation. I liked this one a lot. I recommend this one on YouTube for anyone who wants to check this out.
This is the story about
bring
how
the volume
Jackson
up a little
Pollock became tangled up in a Films were made to help us connect.
Goddamn
Yet somehow they've made us less connected.
I found myself, when I saw this, how could she still look that
with
good?
The Soviet Union.
Anyway.
But it's also the story about how a radical New York City art movement aligned with America's economic and cultural dominance after World War II.
Yeah, I mean, see, these guys and women, these people existed on their own. You know, this was just...
In the late 1940s, a left-wing avant-garde painter like Jackson Pollock would have seemed like a very unlikely candidate to receive support from the CIA. Now, this was a time when many Americans, including President Harry Truman, loathed abstract modern art. Americans appreciated more traditional, realistic approaches to painting, and they were put off by the works of artists like Pablo Picasso. Add to this fact that Jackson Pollock was suspected of communist ties, and the CIA's backing of Pollock seems all the more improbable during the height of the McCarthy era. Up until World War II, America had never produced large, influential art movements like in Europe. Most American artists during the 1920s and 1930s had conventional approaches to painting, or if they did paint abstractly, they took their cues from Europe. But after World War II, something unexpected happened. A brood of radical American painters helped make New York City the new center of the art world. Artists like Mark Rothko, Willem de Kooning, and Jackson Pollock captured the world's attention with large-scale works of pure color and form. This style of painting was radical and new, and most importantly, it was a wholly American art movement. It was called abstract expressionism. And by the 1950s, this new American painting was the most exciting thing happening in the art world. But to the CIA, this American art movement represented a potential weapon in the fight against communism. The wreckage of World War II left the United States and the Soviet Union as the world's two remaining superpowers, and the tensions that would eventually lead to the Cold War began immediately. The US found itself up against a massive Soviet propaganda machine. This was a war for hearts and minds, and by the late 1940s, a war that the CIA felt they were losing. The Soviets were spending $250 million a year on communist propaganda. And to make it worse, the CIA felt the Soviets had stolen all the best words like freedom, justice, and peace. So the CIA decided to make a massive push to promote American arts and culture. And Jackson Pollock and the abstract expressionists would find a special place in the CIA's portfolio. The CIA realized they could use abstract expressionism to highlight the differences between American and Soviet politics. And more specifically, they could highlight the appeal of American culture over Soviet culture. Because in this new war of ideas, the abstract expressionists evoked the most sacred American values, freedom and individualism. The CIA's plan makes perfect sense when one considers the state of Soviet art of the time. Beginning in the 1930s under Joseph Stalin, the USSR restricted Soviet artists to a single genre, socialist realism. This was an official style of art that idealized communist values and glorified the Soviet
anyone who
working class.
wants to pick
The
this
goal of the
up
art
is,
was-
both of the clips
and
that we
definitely
used
do. They're if you just want to get a little thumbprint of this whole idea, those are great. I watched both of those, and they're both fantastic because it makes sense. You're looking back on it, you're like, that makes complete and total sense to me that this is real.
Right.
Right. One of the things he says in that clip that, that still, I mean, this was, we were talking about the 50s, post World War II, but I bet you could go on any social media today and hear people, we're in an election cycle, hear people talk about war of ideas, thought control, war of thought. Like we have to instill in you this feeling. And the Soviets used the good words, so we're going to bypass words altogether, just like abstract expressionists bypass lines and representation. We're gonna instill a feeling in you that you can't really explain, but it's there.
I found myself thinking the following too, right? Because both you and I come out of the punk rock movement. We're both fans of the genre, have been, our whole lives.
Still are.
Yeah, plays an influence in our art, plays an influence in our lives. So I found myself thinking, if the CIA is intentionally manipulating the arts, which makes sense, you're therefore manipulating the revolution and the revolutionaries. If you can guide the revolutionaries to where you want the revolution to go, you're still in control, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense, that because we think of the arts, we think of punk, we think of, the artists as the radicals in America, that they're the ones that have rejected the state. They're against the state. We look to artists and for social commentary. An artist is the mirror of the society that produces them. So if you're able to control the reflection, if you're able to control it, and that the revolutionary and the artist still thinks that they have free will, that they're doing something, against the deep state or the state, when in all essence they could just be little more than a tool.
Yeah, I think in all of the arts, I think artists are pretty easily manipulated. Artists on this level, these were people that enjoy, that just wanted to make art, just wanted to be free of, going to work every day, and wanted to, and then all of a sudden that success comes in. They're not thinking necessarily about where it came from or why, because it's like a mad scientist. It's like, I just want my research funded, I just want to be able to make art, and my art is selling, I'm suddenly, Guggenheim is renting me a studio. Like, this is great. I'm not going to ask why.
Right.
And I do think I don't think their art was compromised or created by the government. I just think the CIA saw it as a tool,
as an asset.
Yeah, we can use this. We can use music same way, literature same way. There's no way in the world that Jack Kerouac on the road became the book that it is, and he became the man that he was on his own.
Right.
There's no way that happened. Not back then. I think a lot. I think your CIA and Jackson Pollock connection, there's probably a much bigger connection to.
I agree with you there, because I've also find myself thinking, if you control the discourse and you control the conversation, right, you know what the questions are and you know what the answers will be. And, as I dug a little bit deeper into this, as we were talking a little bit earlier, they clearly have their tentacles into the literary community of that period. They're funding the magazines that print this, print that.
There was along with the abstract expressionists in New York City in the 40s and the 50s and early 60s, there was a musical movement that went along with that bebop jazz, that beatnik culture, that, the writers, it all happened by, and then later even guys like Bob Dylan and things like that, and it's kind of like the CIA seems like they're pushing disruption, because the culture has to move forward, society has to move forward, and it doesn't want to. You have to destroy to create, kind of thing,
right?
Right. And like you said, that's very American. I mean, we're a country that rebelled to be a country based on ideas.
Some of the bigger names today, like I found myself thinking Damien Hirst, is that how you say it? Damien Hirst, the British guy. He was the big name when we were at Blue Elephant. Yeah. Everyone wanted to go see Damien Hirst. So he puts a shark in formaldehyde. Is that brilliant art? Or is it just a shark in formaldehyde, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to derive any meaning from Damien Hirst, and that's a fairly big name today.
Yeah, it just evokes feeling. It's just, I know exactly what you're talking about when people were like, I think it started with, when Marcel Duchamp put a toilet seat, a urinal on a thing and said, "This is your art." Like what, it's all about feeling. It's not about content so much. It's about how do I feel about this? What is this? Is, you know, this is shocking me a little bit. This is confusing me, and you know, why am I confused by this? Why does this bother me? You know, or why does this interest me? You know, it stimulates you. You know, and I think that's America. You know, that's American, and that's obviously what they felt was like, this is going to overthrow the world. Is just the idea that, you know, feelings matter, and that, you know, your perception of things matters. It's, you know, it makes a lot of sense to me that the government was behind it, and probably still is. You know, why not? You know, you know, I'm sure that, you know, I don't know that anything really is happening in modern art, but I'm also not in tune with it the way I used to be.
Same here.
I don't, you know, but nothing's coming across at me, you know, on a big, you know, the internet makes it so like you can see everything all at once. And, you know, maybe the internet itself is modern art, you know, maybe that is modern art. You know, I don't know, or it serves the same purpose. You know, who knows? You know, but
let's cue up that moth light, and I think we'll have one more go at this, and then I'm going to talk. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about some off-topic things. This is Stan Brackett's Moth Light. Silent film from 1963. First time I'd ever seen abstract cinema. If you don't know who Stan Brakhage is, I really suggest checking him out. Prolific filmmaker from the 1950s on. Probably one of the most important American filmmakers people have never heard about.
Yeah, and like this kind of film was like, well, we're gonna download, or we're gonna bombard your senses with, you know, 100,000 paintings in 10 minutes.
Well, this for me is what helped to actually make abstract art.
Yeah.
This helped me break through to where, you know, abstract art, if anything, it's a whole nother language, right? But from this point on, whenever I looked at Pollack, whenever I looked at de Kooning, whenever I look, it always had motion in it. In my mind, every time I look at those paintings, they're Stan Brakhage. They're moving, they're evolving. I see them in different ways.
You know, whether it's you know, Pollack, you know, de Kooning is also a big one for me. That as a painter, you know the physicality that must have went into this, and it's almost a shame that you can't see it that way.
Right.
You can't see the evolution of it. You can't see the energy. As like Rick Rubin says, you can't see the charge that went into it. You know, the act of creation.
So we'll let this finish. I'll ask one last question, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of. We're going to talk about something completely irrelevant.
It's all
because
relevant.
Why not?
It's
all irrelevant. Exactly. And I remember my grandmother hated the fact that I was into the arts. Right? She hated it. It didn't make money. You know, it was
That's a tough one. You know, you're trying to quantify something, and it's like there's, you know, oh well, only a few people make money in this.
I remember a little different reaction. I was at Shepherd and I won the student exhibition, which is what a big fucking deal, right? So you won the, you know, anyway. But my grandma turned to me and looked at me in shock. You won. I was like, yeah, I won. I won.
And it's the arts is a tough.
It is
thing to navigate, and you know, to still be doing it and still trying to challenge yourself and to think, you know, my whole perspective on art is changed a great deal.
Yeah.
You know, just to where I think about it and what you know, why I do it and things like that, you know. But yeah, I mean, Jackson Pollack, again, he was kind of like the first art star of America.
Right.
You know, he was the art celebrity. You know.
Yeah, there's that famous Time. Is it Time magazine? I think he's in.
Because he was so
or
dynamic.
Life. I believe it was Life.
And he
magazine.
took, and they took a lot of great pictures of him. Like where just the intensity of him, and you'd see those pictures, and you'd be like, "That's what I want to be. That guy."
Right. Yeah, I want to be that guy.
Like look at this. He's out in this barn. He's pained. He's this pained artist, and and it's like, yeah.
I think he was the whole reason I took up smoking.
Yeah,
I'm happy that I quit smoking. But definitely Pollack, Jack Kerouac,
my early
Burroughs.
Yeah, my late teens, early 20s. Looking back on it now, I just shake my head. But, like I was trying, deliberately trying to be that type of person.
Right, yes.
It was painfully trying to be that type of person. And
and we all loved it, Skye.
The thing is, we all were doing it. We all were in it, and because it was just, like I said, it doesn't abstract expression, and doesn't. It's not just what you make; it's who you are. It's the the person behind it matters more, and that's punk rock too. Like who you are matters more than what you actually produce. Yeah, But it was a good time. We all lived.
Close your closing thoughts. Does this change anything for you when you heard that the CIA was manipulating arts? Does it change anything?
I think the only thing that it would, because these people did this art anyway, and the CIA just backed it to promote it, and I'm sure they still do, or maybe the industry itself now does it by itself. The only thing it would change for me would be like to younger people to be like, getting famous or being successful in art, that's probably out of your control. That no matter how good you are, how much you do, it's always been who you know and where you're at and what your connection is, and that there is a behind the scenes people who pick and choose.
William de Kooning pimped his lady out so he would get better reviews.
Yeah,
that's no secret.
It's
his I don't know, lover or whatever you want to call her. She would sleep with art critics for better.
Yeah, there's definitely people. There's tastemakers, and to think that the government was involved with it and funding it to promote America, to promote U.S. art. It's like, that makes sense. The punk rock movement started in the United States, but didn't get any traction until it went to England, and then why all of a sudden was there this big push to have American punk rock becomes acceptable, right. Because we need it to be ours, And
now we're going to get completely off topic. We'll talk for a little bit longer and I'm glad you bring up the punk rock. You were at the Cro-Mag show. You were there, right?
Yeah.
You saw all that. One of the things that bothers me as an old punk guy, who's come back in to see shows and see different scenes, is I was shocked at the overt politics involved. And I've run into for me, punk was always the arena of ideas, like art, right? I'm expecting to run into all kinds of insanity here, from anarchy to Nazis. That was part of the attraction of punk, is this diversity of ideas all mangled together. I'm not real happy, and I'm confused. I guess I'm confused more than anything to see political agendas, if you will.
I would say that what happens now started then. Started with the CIA wanting to back abstract expression, and then the artists and musicians, who whatever. I use art very broadly. Art artists, politicians, and the government, back in the 40s and 50s realized these people really are the ones who are moving society. Mm-hmm. So we need to be in control of that.
Yeah.
And now you have, right wing and left wing punks and all this stuff. And it was like, where did this,
and left wing punks.
Yeah, well,
I remember the right when we were
sucked.
young. There were skinheads that the wannabe Nazis and DC was loaded with that kind of stuff, and they were the bad guys in the scene. But
and then punk, like one of the things I always joke about with the left, particular, is Rage Against the Machine was like this great band that came out of nowhere and was so relevant during those Bush years. And as soon as Obama gets elected, they basically break up because, well, that's our machine now.
Right.
We're not going to rage against our machine. Our machine just got in office. Punk rock sucked for 8 years of Obama because the left was afraid, we can't complain now. Mm-hmm. The best thing to happen to punk rock was, like Donald Trump, is, what I mean? And he's more punk rock than any punk rocker. He's this crazy nut that's, what I mean? That's so individual. I'm not even going into that, but I recognize him and what's going on.
He could front a hardcore band. He was like Ice-T in body count, the reincarnated.
You talk about the politicizing of the arts, and then I'm not big into Trump, but I do recognize that the reason that he's such a disruptor because he's not part of this.
Right.
And that's why he's hated by all sides.
I agree.
Because he's not part of it.
Right.
And it's become so entrenched. The government is so culture war is really, how do you even rebel against a system that's commodified rebellion?
Right. Right. Commodified rebellion. What a line.
Like, what are you supposed to do? Like, I mean,
you control
drop
the revolution.
out.
You control the revolutionaries.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that started with this, if not sooner. But this is it's topical right now because these documents have come out and stuff. Right. But this is when the government realized we have to be in control of the arts. Mm-hmm. We have to control this. We have to steer it at least. Right. We have to steer the arts. And I think that what we experience now started then. Yeah. Absolutely.
The last topic I'm going to talk to you about or ask you about, are you aware of this Tim Pool skate park controversy going on in Martinsburg? Have you heard any about that?
I've heard that Martinsburg was supposed to get a really nice skate park.
Well, let me tell you a little bit of a story. Or tell you what's going on, bring you up to date, and tell me what you think of this. I don't skate, but skating for whatever reason is connected to the punk scene.
Yeah, so it's counterculture,
right?
Or it was.
As long as I've been into punk, I'm conscious of skaters, but I'm not a skater. There's an abandoned 4.5-acre park in it's not even a park. It's an old industrial land.
And where kids go skate.
Right. For the past 10 years, a small group of them have used this property.
Yeah, I have seen some stuff about this. Not just from you, but...
Tim Pool purchased it, the podcaster Tim Pool, for almost $1 million with the idea of turning it into an actual skate park.
Yeah, it's where people have been going anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
Let's just do it.
So there's this group of young people that are, because it's Tim Pool and they don't like his politics, have made a big, I guess you would call it, kerfuffle about it. There was an article written in the Washington Post not too long ago. And, the dude who wrote the Washington Post piece didn't even come to Martinsburg. He didn't come to the park. But he says that the skate park has been doing fine without Tim Pool for the past 10 years, which is an absolute joke. The one thing I want to stress is there's no lights back there. There's no, parking back there. It's not a real park.
And it's probably not a real safe place to be.
That's
at any given time, day or night.
Right. It's a shooting gallery for local junkies, So I found myself shocked that anyone that lives in downtown Martinsburg or grew up in downtown Martinsburg would oppose anyone who's willing to do something beneficial to the community, but specifically to young people. Nick, let me ask you a question. I have my sister's son is my nephew, correct? Your sister's son is a nephew. All right, what's his kid called? Cousin?
I think it's still your it's just another nephew.
It's a great nephew.
Yeah.
My 15-year-old great nephew was stabbed trying to skate in the streets of Martinsburg. Got into it with some other kids, but he got stabbed up skating. This happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So to anyone that would oppose that park, I just really need to understand how and why you wouldn't advocate for a well-lit skate park for the youth in Martinsburg. That's my take on it. I don't care whose money it is.
Yeah, I would, from
You ever watch Temple?
Occasionally.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I would think from a kid point of view, it's probably like, we don't want rules. We don't want a supervisor. We don't want, we like it the way it is, that it's crazy and that we can do whatever we want. But from people that vote and people that pay taxes, like, hey, I want my kids to be able to go skate and to have it be a safe environment.
Yeah, I agree. I support.
What's wrong with that? That it's like, it's like, well, this is all we're trying to do here. It's like people are doing it anyway, so let's just make it safe. Let's go ahead and do that. But I get the kid point of view of it, but it's not very. Kids don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know anything. Don't listen to the kids. They don't know anything. And as soon as somebody does get hurt or whatever else, then they want to sue the city and for not having it be organized.
I gotta say, like, Frederick remains my ideal model of what any downtown should strive to be. I'm not as in touch with Frederick as I once was, but still, its layout, the resources dedicated to the community. It's got a wonderful music scene. It's got a wonderful art scene.
It's hard for people. And I saw it because I grew up in Frederick, spent my whole life there. So when downtown was boarded up and derelict, blighted, and now it's not. Now it's vibrant and all this stuff going on. You have to gentrify if you want that to happen. And it's like, look, I hate that downtown Frederick is difficult to park in. I hate that on Saturday afternoons I can't go downtown because it's so crowded. And 4th of July, it's tourists, and I'm a grumpy old man. But I like that I can go to Starbucks coffee, and I like that I can go to a vegan Thai place or whatever. You're just like, well, this all comes with that.
Right.
You have to you have to let go and let it be more, and gentrify. It's not a bad thing to do. It's not bad to gentrify. It's like you're not selling out.
Right.
By saying I want some lights and a fence around the skate park.
Right. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and call that an episode. Skye, Hissey, thank you for coming over to Martinsburg and having this incredible conversation together. Before we totally go off the air, let's talk about some of the bands that you've played in.
Oh my! Well, yeah, in the ancient days.
Yeah, talk about the ancient days.
I think the only bands that I played in that probably would have been around here at all. I played in this band called Larry's, and we definitely played down in West Virginia a good bit at the Cliffside Inn and those kind of places, kind of more Harper's Ferry end of things. I played in a band called Thrillsville that played down here a good bit. And, way back, I played in a band called Blue Eyed Devils that was like a rockabilly band. Played down here. I also played with a group Kim and Jason Roderick, I played in a band with them for a little while that played Martinsburg a few times. With the big band at that time was the Deadnecks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know those guys, Joey Broy and the Deadnecks.
I know Joey.
Yeah, it was like a horror rock, kind of thing. So Martinsburg's always had music going on. It's always been kind of underground and kind of, really
cheap. It's cheap.
It's grassroots. Yeah. It's what we were talking about when we were younger. It's making it happen, finding a way to have it happen.
Let's talk about a couple of the friends that Nick and I have recorded with. You played with Pat Fable, right?
I have, yeah.
Let's talk about playing with Pat. And that was Cafe
de los Muertos.
Which we did 2 shows with them.
Pat is, when we were talking earlier about me growing up and having like older people kind of mentor me and kind of broaden my horizons on art and music. And Pat was definitely one of those people that had a huge influence on me. And, when I was, just a little bit younger than him, but he seemed so adult and so cool and so worldly. And he really took me under his wing a good bit.
Them leather pants. Remember the leather?
It was crazy.
Yeah.
He was just, it was like you go to the FCC art room to do your homework, and it was like Keith Richards was in there.
Yeah.
Like he would dress like every day was a show, and he was on it. He was a wild guy, and he's still in the arts. He teaches up in Frostburg, and he definitely a huge influence on Frederick, and definitely on me personally for sure.
And you played
Andrew
with
Roth.
And let's talk about Andy. What was that band?
He
just called. He
was in Larry's, not Larry's. He was in Truman Sparks. I played with him, and he was another like local legend guy that when I got to be in a band with him, I was just thrilled to be around him and to kind of vibe off him. He's a very intense guy. And it's one of those things as you get to you learn from those people.
Hell of a showman.
Yeah, he's all show, and he's the one that told me, him musically and Ed Ramsberg artistically, that was like when you have an art opening, it's a show.
Right.
People don't want you brooding in the corner and you're in your flannel shirt and torn up jeans and ignoring everybody. You got to be a showman. You got to put on a show. You got to sell it.
Yeah,
and
I love that part.
and like we said, this is Jackson Pollack. His art was one thing, but that the CIA orchestrated him being in Life magazine.
Right.
And those images, they paid the best photographer they could possibly get. The selling of Jackson Pollack. You want to like Jackson Pollack even if you don't like his work,
right?
Because you're like, that guy. He's so brooding. He's this intensity. You're like, it's a rock star.
Right.
He was the first art star, rock star, and then there's been a bunch of them since him. But everybody else in that abstract expressionist, nobody else could be that. Mm-hmm. The rest of them were just kind of like intense, but not American. I mean, Mark Rothko was like an intense intellectual, and de Kooning was intense, but he was foreign. Mm-hmm. He was too prissy.
I was going to mention
Pollack would get drunk and fight you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
America,
absolutely. This is portrayed in the film too. His greatest period of productivity is 2 years that he spent on the medication Depakote, right, to control the alcoholism. It's the only period where he's not drinking, and that all the big paintings, the big mural stuff,
it's all done then.
That's done under the aid of a psychotropic medication, Depakote. I'm going to bring this episode to a conclusion.
Yeah, sponsored by Depakote.
Sponsored by Depakote. Thank you, Skye, for coming over
it's
to
a pleasure. It's good.
It's
always good to see you, and every time I
Absolutely.
do, I was like, why don't I see you more? But
Absolutely.
I'll make an effort for that.
Same here. Thank you for being a guest.
Yeah, absolutely.